Happy podcast day, everybody. I have the wonderful Prerna Pickett on the podcast, who is the author of If You Only Knew. She's going to tell us all about her somewhat unique journey to getting published and share with us all about her writing style and what it is like to be in her debut year. I'm excited to hear about you and this and your novel because it looks amazing. So let's start off by having you tell us about your debut novel, If You Only Knew.
So, If You Only Knew is about a boy, Corey, who just was recently released from jail, and Tessa, who is the daughter of the prosecutor who put Corey in jail, and how they end up falling for each other. There's obviously a lot more that goes on. Corey is in a gang, and he is trying to get out, but it's very difficult. And Tessa is a motorcycle rider and also drag races her motorcycle, and she has a secret of her own that sort of plays into the tension between them and what ends up being it begins like the moment that starts off the major plot, which is that Corey is forced to vandalize the home of Tessa's father, and she catches him, and he gets away, but he returns to confess, and then Tessa convinces her father to let Corey to sort of to fix all of the things that he broke in the house, sort of like as a second chance, because she's trying to sort of redeem herself and some things that she has done in the past. So that's pretty much what it's about. There's lots of things other things are going on. There's some twists and turns, and there's obviously kissing. So
that sounds
a lot of fun. Thank you. Yeah, no, there's always kissing in my books. So.
Yeah. I just love it's like sort of like a forbidden love, it feels like to me. Like her dad prosecuted him, and you would think that would be like a no-go, and I always love stories like that. So I'm excited to read it and have it come out, and that is out February 11th, so in just a few days. So tell us a little bit about your journey to this point where you have your novel coming out.
So I got my book deal. I have a very unusual story. I actually got my book deal without an agent.
Wow.
My publisher, Spoon Reads, is an imprint of Macmillan, and they accept unsolicited manuscripts on their website. They open up submissions every few months, and you can upload your manuscript onto their website, and then readers get to read and rate and review your manuscript. And that's pretty much how you get the attention of the editors and the interns that work at Spoon, as through sort of promoting yourself and your manuscript up through their website and through whatever social media outlets you might use. And I had heard really good things about them. I had a couple of friends who had uploaded their manuscripts up there and had gotten book deals and were very positive, had very positive experiences, and so I decided to just take a chance, because at that point I actually got into the Pitch Wars contest in 2014 with this book, and I had gotten interest from agents, and I had done some revisions, but it just never got to the next step, which is getting an agent. Right. And so I just figured, you know what, I've done everything else, I've exhausted all other options, might as well do this, and I didn't have anything to lose at that point. So I put it up on August 2017, I believe, and I promptly forgot about it. Like, I literally put it out of my head. I didn't think about it again. I didn't tell anybody that I had put my manuscript up on this website. It was just up there, and I left it alone. And then I got the call, or the email, it was in February 2018 that I got the email from my editor that said that they wanted to talk to me about publishing my book. So,
wow.
it was a kind of a crazy experience and very unusual, but also very exciting and unexpected.
Yeah, that's definitely a different type of journey than the usual, like, querying forever to find an agent. That's awesome, though.
Yeah, and I actually wrote the first draft back in 2014, early 2014, so it's been 6 years since I wrote the first draft.
So it was a long journey with this one book.
Yes, it's been quite a while.
That's awesome. So did you at any point, because I know you said you did pitch wars and all that, did you at any point traditionally query just on your own?
I did, yes. I have traditionally queried three manuscripts, I believe, at this point. So four actually. My very first is in a trunk very far away that no one will ever see it. It's a paranormal romance. It was okay, but it's definitely not going to ever be published.
We all have that one book.
Yes. And then my second novel I queried back in 2013, I believe. And I also entered that into a couple of contests. Sun versus Snow is one of the ones that I entered and got into. And I had some interest from agents, but again, nothing came of it.
Right.
And then my debut, if you only knew, I entered in this contest and queried it. And then I had my most recent book that I wrote, which actually I have signed with an agent, but I'm not announcing it until this Friday. So
okay, all right.
I do have an agent officially, but yes, I'm excited about.
Well, that's awesome. Well, can you just share like maybe what your number one tip would be for authors who are in that querying process right now?
Oh wow! So definitely distract yourself. I worked on other things while I was querying because I needed to just kind of get into a different headspace, and I also needed to do the next thing. I think the only thing you can do as a writer, the only thing you have control over is your own work and what you're working on and what you're doing and your writing. I mean, there's so many other factors that you have no say in. So I just continue to write, and that's all I can really do.
I think that's so crucial, though, when you're querying. Like, you don't want to just be doing nothing and refreshing your email every day. Like, work on a new project, go do a new hobby to, like, break it out or read a book, something different, just to make sure you're not just being anxious about your query responses.
Yes, and I tend to read when I'm stressed out. I read a lot of historical romance. That's like my number one thing. That's like my way of cleansing my brain when I'm in a stressful situation. So I do read a lot of historical romance as well as working on another project.
Yeah. Which, hey, if you know what works for you to kind of relax yourself, that's good. The type of stories you need to read. That's awesome.
Yes.
So my next question for you is a two-parter. I'd love to know what the hardest part of writing is for you, and then the hardest part of being an author so far.
So the hardest part of writing for me is, I feel like there's a difficult part in each step of writing. Like in the first draft, it's difficult just to get, the hardest part is getting the words out and figuring out what the plot is and who your characters are and their journey and what's happening. And then there are revisions, it's figuring out how to tighten the plot, how to make sure that it all is sort of coming together and, kill your darlings and all that. And that's, for me, is the hardest. There's a difficult parts in each, during every step of the process. And so, I don't know if there is specifically a hardest thing.
Just depends which stage you're in.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And so it just depends on where I am in the writing process. Right now, I am just in the more editorial phase. And so right now, it's just figuring out what to tweak and in my story that I'm currently working on, and where I want to make those tweaks and how it'll affect the rest of the book, and how I'm going to make sure that those edits makes sense throughout the rest of the manuscript, because when you pull on that thread, it affects everything else. And so, for me, that right now is the hardest part. And then, the hardest part of being a writer, as being an author, is definitely doing any sort of promo is extremely difficult. Talking about my book, tweeting and Instagramming, and there's just so many things that you can do with your social media, but again, you don't really have control over how people are going to react to it, or if they're going to actually be interested in reading your book, no matter how much you promote your book. Then you might not. So you may not sell as well as you would like for it to do, or
right.
And so there's just so many factors that are out of your hands, and so the hardest part for me. And all I can do at the end of the day for me as an author is just do my best, and I want to make sure that I don't regret anything later on, and I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to get word out about my book and do the promo part of it, and then it's just so that in the future I don't look back with any regrets,
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting, too, that, writing is such a solitary thing we do. So you spend all this time writing your story and crafting it and making it how you want, and then you have to be so... And for some people it's natural, like if you're a really outgoing person, but to promo all the time as you lead up to the... as you lead up to it coming out, for some people can be so difficult. Like, I'm sort of like an extroverted introvert, but I definitely need my times where I'm like, okay, nobody talk to me. So I can imagine, like, promoting all the time and putting yourself out there, like, all the time to be like, oh, here's my book, buy my book, could be kind of exhausting at certain points.
Oh, yeah, no, and I relate to that. I'm definitely more of an extroverted introvert, but I do need my sort of alone time, and I need to step away every once in a while to kind of clear my head and just be on my own. I definitely really like to have alone time.
Definitely.
It's sort of refresh myself, I guess. And
yes.
It's just, yeah. So no, I understand. Yeah, I totally get that. And it can be really hard when you're in the middle of your debut, and which is especially 2020, and my book is coming out, and you don't really have time to step away because you're hustling. You have to hustle, and so that can be difficult.
Well, you're hustling the book that's coming out. You're working on a separate book, and then maybe thinking about the next thing you're gonna do, and yeah, there's always something to be thinking about and working on.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, and sometimes it is very overwhelming.
Yes, I can imagine. Well, let's flip this question, and we'll talk about the best parts of being a writer and being an author. What are those for you?
The discovery for me is the best part. That initial spark, that of the idea, and discovering what who your characters are and what their journey is going to be, and what it is that they want, their motivation. That for me is the best part. I'm a plantster, I think is what it's called, a plotter / pantser.
Oh, I like it.
I'll have like so I'll have a rough outline, but I also am very much a pantser when it comes to certain things. In my stories, my characters tend to take on a life of their own, and plans change a lot. So, that for me is the fun process, the fun part of the process, and what I love is just discovering those things about my characters. And
yeah, I love that.
It's like, it is really like creating your own little world. That's in your head, and trying to. What are those memes where it's like, this is what it looks like in your head, and then when you actually write it down, it's like a disaster, it's a complete mess, it's just hideous. But I do enjoy trying to make it like a prettier version, and try to match it to what it is in my head.
Right. That is always the goal.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely, I love to know, like, different people's writing styles, because I think different genres can allow for different things, but also it's just good to know, like, everybody does it differently. There isn't one way. I remember when I first really got into, wanting to write a novel, I was very much under the impression that it had to be done, like, one way. And I had to outline, like, everything super hardcore before I could even write a word. And that is definitely not what works for me, because I like the discovery, too. I love to for a little bit, like, just kind of let my characters lead me where they want to go. And I, have, like, basic plot of, what I want to happen. But for the first, like, 30,000 words, I kind of just end up having fun and getting to know my characters, and that obviously adds some time on the revision side, but it's the most fun part of it for me.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that is, for me, also, the best part of writing. And I think you also learn a lot about yourself when you're writing, and that you'll write certain sentences and paragraphs, and you'll read back and you think, oh, I wrote that. I can't be. It's sometimes takes me by surprise rereading my own work, what comes out.
Yeah. Sometimes I read something and I'm like, wow, that's really good. Like, but did I actually write that?
Yeah, definitely. I've had those moments.
It's always a good moment. Well, let's talk about your love of writing. Do you remember, when your dream of being an author began?
So I've been writing my whole life. I've always enjoyed writing the story. I think my first story that I remember writing was in 3rd grade. I wrote a story about a kid named Nevada who had his jacket stolen. And so it was a mystery, and I had a lot of fun working on it. And since then, I've always created these stories in my head and written some down, but it wasn't until college that I actually attempted to write my first novel, and it was really awful. And and I think I quit after like the first 3 chapters. I just decided, you know what, this is bad. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I was thinking. Let's just forget this ever happened. And then I was pregnant with my second child, and I just I felt like I was in limbo. I think it happens a lot when you become a parent. You can sort of lose a part of yourself, and you try to figure out where you are, and right. The process of life, I guess, and you lose yourself in just parenting. And so I felt like writing was what I needed to do in order to figure out who I was and to sort of feel like myself again. And I had also read Twilight by Stephanie Myers, so shout out, because I know that book has influenced a lot of writers.
Definitely, so many writers.
So many writers, and so I thought, you know what, I can do this. And I ended up Googling just Stephanie Myers, and I actually went on her website and read some Q&As that she had done and interviews, and it just really inspired me to pursue this dream I'd always had. And so, yeah, I think one of the things that she said was that if you want to be a writer, you have to actually write, and it's not going to be good the first time.
Yeah, very true.
In order to become a better writer, you have to write. And so your practice makes perfect. And so that was when I realized, oh, wow, yeah, it's okay for it to be bad as long as you get better.
Right.
So I think it was 22 when I finally started, 21, 22 years old, somewhere around there, that I finally started writing. Full publication, that was my goal. And of course, I'm 33, almost 34 now, so it's been a while.
But that's okay. I mean, I feel like we want it to, and we expect it to be so much faster than it actually is, but publishing is such a slow business. And writing itself, too, like finishing a whole novel can take a while, and then the revision process that it takes to get it where it needs to be is way longer than we want it to be, and sometimes expect it to be.
Yeah, no, it is. It can take, it's been a long journey for me, but, I think that it worked out the way it's supposed to work out. I remember making a goal that I wanted to be published before I was 30, And obviously that did not happen. But looking back, I often wonder, like, why did I set that goal? Why did I have to play? There's no limit
Right.
On your dreams. You know, there's no expiration date. So that's definitely a lesson I've learned over the years. And I'm grateful for the journey and that I've had, because it definitely made me appreciate these moments that I'm in right now much more.
Definitely. And I'm glad you persisted and read Twilight and felt inspired. I've heard lots of people say, like, oh yeah, I read Twilight and I felt like, oh, I could do this. I can write a book. So, you know, I love that her novels and her, you know, story kind of spurred a lot of authors that we probably wouldn't have now if she hadn't,
exactly. No.
you know, written what she did.
I totally agree. I think it really opened the doors for a lot of new authors, and really changed the publishing industry, and especially YA. There's been in the 10 years ago, it was very different from where it is now, and I think that it's much more diverse, and I think that there's so many amazing stories that I wish I had as a teenager that are available now, and that makes me really happy.
Super happy, and I just feel like there's so much, there is so many more stories for so many different types of people who are now able to see themselves in stories that they weren't able to. So I love it. Let's talk a little bit, since we've been talking about you know, revisions and all that, but let's talk about your revision process. So I love your story about how you know, got your contract for If You Only Knew, because I feel like you probably have to be like a revision pro to have put it up on their website and, you know, gotten the editor's attention, because I feel like I have to go through like 12 rounds of revisions and like beta readers and CPs and all that. So tell us a little bit about how that's worked for you, and, you know, now more focusing on, you know, when you had to do it on your own without an agent or an editor.
Yeah, so like yourself, I have critique partners who rate my work before I do anything with it. With my debut, If You Only Knew, I had several critique partners read it and give me feedback, and I think I revised it like 5 times before I put it up onto the website on its own. So it had gone through 5 different rounds of revisions. And then after I got my book deal, I had to do some pretty major structural edits. And that taught me a lot about the revisions. It made me a better editor and also a revisionist. Well, maybe that's not the right word. Actually, it's like industry revisionist. It just made me better at revisions. And I think the biggest thing that for me that works is stepping away after I've gotten notes back and letting them process, and then tackling those revisions. Yeah. I think that it takes me a few days to kind of work out in my head what I want to do. If there's things that I disagree with, well, why do I disagree with it? Is it because it's, I think we have that's very human for us to get defensive of our work. And so when we get any sort of critique, it's like, well, I don't know if I agree with that. So I give myself a few days to sort of not to let my guard down and realize, hey, yeah, maybe this person is right about this. And maybe I do need to work on this. And so for me, that's what my process starts as. And then I tend to just go from the beginning to end. I know some people like to tackle one thing at a time, like a character's journey or the plot, or, they kind of jump around. For me, I need to go from the beginning to the end. And I don't like to jump around at all during revisions. And because usually in the beginning, when you're making changes, it's going to affect the back end of your story. anyway, so might as well start there, and then I'll jot down a note that, okay, I changed this in the beginning, make sure that this makes sense at the end.
Right.
And that, that it's not a complete disaster when you get there. So,
that's smart.
yeah, that's sort of what my process is like. And I think it's more complicated than I think my brain kind of complicates it more. But that's a simplification of it.
I think taking time away after feedback is so crucial. I got, some feedback on one of my manuscripts, and I'm currently pregnant, so I'm like hormonal and emotional, and I remember reading it and I was like, oh my gosh, I was like, I'm just gonna throw this book in the trash, like so emotional. But
oh my gosh,
yeah. But I did. I took time. I took like 2 weeks, and I continued to read through the feedback and really process it and think about it, because you're so in deep in a novel that when somebody is like, oh, you should, maybe like, and it happened to be that this point of view in my novel that I loved, this other person, it wasn't their favorite at all, right? So it's things like that, and you have to really wrap your mind around the benefits of changing it and all that, but the space and time away from it is super crucial, just because it is a book of your heart. They all are, and you're really deeply invested in it, but that's a reason why we have critique partners and betas who can pick up on things that you're kind of blind to at a certain point.
Yes, and it can also be extremely daunting when you have to make some big changes.
Definitely.
And we want to take, I think we want to take the easier path, because it can seem scary. Like, okay, if I make all these changes, I have so much work to do, and I don't know if I'm capable of doing that much work. So, definitely, I have to step back and sort of give myself a pep talk that, about, yes, I can do this, I can handle this. It's not that scary. You wrote an entire novel. You can definitely, tackle revisions. You can change things, and it'll be okay.
But again, like we talked about, when you're in that process, in the revision process, that's super hard. That's like the hardest part of it. Revisions, they always are fun. As long as they, everything ends up being better than it was before, then it's all worth it. But you gotta first make it to that point.
I totally agree.
Well, I have only one last question for you, and I've been told it's somewhat of a hard question, but I would love to know what your favorite book is right now. This isn't your favorite book of all time, just a book you've read recently that you really enjoyed.
Ooh, okay. That is an extremely difficult question, because I read a lot.
Yes.
So there's always something that I'm reading or that I just fall in love with. So, like I said, I read a lot of historical romance when I'm in between projects, or if I'm in the middle of revisions. I feel like it's the only genre that I can sort of deal with while I'm working. And I just read a book by Stacey Reed. It was my very first book by her, and it's called My Darling Duke. And this is historical romance, like I stated, and it's just very romantic, and it's a slow burn, and I just really loved reading it, and definitely had lots of moments that made me swoon, and
I love that.
and lots of it's very, very well written, and I really enjoyed it, and it was the first book I read this year, actually. So
awesome! Started off with a good one.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. I'm glad. I feel like you picked a book really quickly, though, so that's good. It wasn't like a stumper. Sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, I have no idea how to answer this question.
Yeah, and I would say, I've read so many great books, and I love so many books, and I also feel like I can't just pick one, especially as a YA writer. And for the YA genre, I've read so many great YA books, I feel like it would be a disservice for me to pick just one of those. and because I don't want anybody to feel bad, and I also don't want to I just I don't want, it's too difficult to pick just one, and that, for me, in that genre, and for me, and historical romance right now is, like, the thing that I'm really into, so it worked out.
It did. I love it. Well, that one sounds good, and I always love a slow burn that makes you swoon. That's always fun to read. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast and sharing with me about yourself and your journey and your book that is coming out, If You Only Knew. Thank you guys so much for listening, and as always, please share the podcast and rate and review if you can, and connect with me on Instagram and Twitter @RoseQuinny, QUINNY. Thanks so much.